Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Ann Bennett and we are cooking up history here at the Laurel Historical Society in Maryland. Today we are taking a look at the role cookbooks played in the women's suffrage movement, which was started in 1848 at the Seneca Falls Convention and went for 72 years until the ratification of the 19th Amendment in 1920. However, that doesn't really take into consideration all the efforts of the women for centuries before the Seneca Falls Convention, and the fact that the 19th Amendment was pretty incomplete. It wasn't until decades following the ratification that African American, Asian American, and Native American women had full chance to vote. But the role that suffrage cookbooks played in this process, in this fight to vote, is pretty remarkable. So it's also a very politically savvy type of move. They were realizing that more radical tactics of women's suffrage were not working. And so by publishing cookbooks, this was a way to modify the unwomanly image that men and other anti-suffragists had of women who did support the right to vote for women and women's enfranchisement. A way to turn the table against the arguments that supporting suffrage would take women away from the home, away from the family, away from their traditional roles in society, and flip it on its head, because what could be more womanly and feminine and appealing to the people that were opposed to suffrage than by presenting a cookbook to women. And this was a way to, again, reinforce the womanly, motherly, nurturing qualities that were prized at this time, but do it in a way that would still support and spread the message of the suffrage movement. And this was a way to get that message into the hands of millions more women through the publication of different cookbooks. Suffrage cookbooks follow the pattern that was started with community and charity cookbooks following the Civil War, when funds were raised to support veterans and soldiers who had fought in the war. And the suffrage cookbooks follow that same mold. So it was a way to be charitable, it was a way to support local causes, but it also showed that women could really be politically savvy and have power in the family, and especially financial power as well, by fundraising and supporting the women's suffrage movement through the publication of these cookbooks.
The National Cookery Book was a precursor to the women's suffrage cookbooks. Published in 1876 for the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, it featured recipes that were requested from all states and was an early reflection of regional tastes and availability of ingredients. The cookbook that I showed you earlier in the video, Women's Suffrage Cookbook, was published in 1886 by Hattie Burr and was a fundraiser for the Massachusetts suffragists. The recipes were not very exciting or distinctive, but they represented a wide variety of professions, including teachers and authors. In 1909, the Washington State Women's Cookbook, titled Votes for Women, Good Things to Eat, was published by the Washington Equal Suffrage Association. It promoted women's rights more so than the 1886 volume and included women's full names rather than Mrs. So-and-so contributed the recipe. In 1915, the suffrage cookbook, published in Pittsburgh in western Pennsylvania, was a blend of recipes, some from famous contributors like Jack London, along with photographs and playful titles, as we see in the Auntie's favorite hash, signaling Auntie not as your aunt or uncle, but as the anti-suffragists. Recipes commonly associated with the suffrage movement include angel food cake, orange cake, and fruit cakes. So you'll see a lot of the same ingredients or recipes in all of these suffrage cookbooks. All of these foods were considered dainty and appropriate for women.
So there are about a dozen or so suffrage cookbooks in this late 1800s all the way up until the 1920s time period. And again, it was a safe, and feminine way to advance the beliefs of the women's suffrage movement, again, while at the same time appealing to the strengths of being a mother, being a woman, being nurturing, being loving and caring, but at the same time, again, being politically savvy and being financially powerful. So if you like this little look at the role that cookbooks played in the women's suffrage movements, I recommend a book called All Stirred Up by Laura Cookin, and I'll have that link below. It's all about the way that cookbooks played a role in the women's suffrage movement. I hope you enjoyed this bite into history at the Laurel Historical Society and invite you to join us next time. And like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and be sure to comment below what was one new fact that you learned through this women's suffrage cookbook video.